Level 1. Teppo. The Bullet. The back alleys of Osaka. A humid night in 2003. You are 17 years old. The voices of street vendors outside Namba Station. Neon reflections rippling across wet asphalt. That same cold air carrying the same smell every night. Grilled meat, exhaust fumes, and the faint rot of something decaying underneath it all. Your father has been hospitalized for 3 months. You don't have even half of the 4.2 million yen needed for a liver transplant. You dropped out of school. You're working 2 shifts, mornings at a convenience store, nights at a warehouse, but the money isn't enough. And deep down, you already know it never will be. No matter how many times you run the numbers, the figures keep pressing you into the ground. Then, Kenji shows up. Everyone in the neighborhood knows Kenji, the one who protects local businesses, the one nobody ever asks too many questions about. He tells you one thing: tomorrow morning, take this package to this address. Don't ask questions. His voice carries no threat, no promise. He says it the way someone tells you the weather, and you don't ask. Because you already know, the moment you take this first step, there is no going back. And what frightens you more is that part of you wants to take it. The package is delivered. They hand you an envelope. You open it and start counting. 300,000 yen for a single delivery. The texture of the banknotes under your fingers feels strange, too real, and completely wrong at the same time. That night, you sign the form authorizing your father's surgery, and you notice your hand is trembling. The Yakuza didn't buy you. You walked into a debt with them. Understanding the difference will cost you years. Level 2. Shady. Little brother. 6 months later, you are Kobun, an Oyabun's adopted son. In Japanese organized crime, hierarchy mirrors biological family bonds exactly. The Oya-Kobun relationship, the father and child bond, is considered more sacred than blood. And breaking that rule is the one unforgivable sin. Stumbling is forgivable. Losses are forgivable. Betrayal never is. You spend your first week cleaning the office, washing the cars of senior members, putting the kettle on at 5 in the morning. Nobody uses you for anything criminal, not yet. They are watching you. Eyes are always on you, but no one ever looks directly at your face. They are measuring the limits of your loyalty, your patience, your capacity for silence, and perhaps most importantly, your confidence in yourself. One day, you accidentally see a document on your senpai's desk, a debt list belonging to a rival family, some names crossed out. You try not to think about what those crossed lines mean. Did you look? Did you read it? You don't remember. That is the moment you pass your first real test without anyone saying well done, without anyone noticing. Because in the Yakuza, the most dangerous thing is not curiosity, it is talking. And you are learning this language without being taught. Level 3. Wakashu. Roach-young warrior. Now you are stepping onto the field. The job looks straightforward. Collect the weekly protection fee from a pachinko parlor in Namba. The owner is in his 60s, tired-eyed, so accustomed to the roar of the machines that his voice comes out flat even when he speaks to you. But this week, he doesn't pay. He makes you wait at the door, doesn't even apologize for keeping you standing for 10 minutes, then says, "Next week," as if he's doing you a favor. You go back, report the situation, your voice neither angry nor troubled, just flat, a learned calm. Your senpai looks at your face and says one word: go again. The second time, you are not alone. 2 others walk behind you in silence, hands buried in their pockets, eyes forward. The salon owner pays this time, both this week and last week, cash, counted. On the way home, you notice your stomach is turning. You didn't touch anyone. You didn't say anything. Your voice never rose. You were simply there. But that presence, that silent weight, was enough on its own. And this disturbs you even more, because next time, your stomach won't turn, and you know that too. Level 4. Shite Gashira. Shoddy tall. Head of the Little Brothers. 4 years have passed. Your hair is neatly trimmed at the sides. Your suit is consistent. Your gaze is calm. But that calm comes not from peace. It comes from being permanently on edge. Now you manage the younger ones. 5 people fall under your responsibility, and their mistakes count as your mistakes. Nobody explained this rule to you, but you knew it from the very first day. The first thing you learn at this level: loyalty flows upward, protection flows downward. Your Koban trust you, and you are obligated to keep them safe. This is not a duty, it is an unwritten contract. One night, someone makes a mistake. The youngest one, barely 19, lives with his mother, brings money home on weekends. He crosses into a rival family's territory without permission, a small dispute, something that didn't need to escalate, but the other side chooses to escalate it. Blood is drawn, not much, but enough to start something. When you wake up in the morning, they give you the news. They want you to hand the boy over. What handover means you don't need to ask. You already know. You always knew this moment would come. You think for hours, you stare out the window. The sound of the city tells you nothing. Then you pick up the phone. But the person you call is not your Oyabun. It is the boy's mother. Send your son out of the city. Tonight, don't wait for morning. Your voice is flat and clear. That is all. You hang up. Then you turn to your Oyabun and say, "He ran." Your first great lie. And that lie, from that night forward, carries a weight that must be borne. A burden you chose with open eyes. A debt you entered knowingly. It will take years to accumulate on your shoulders. But it is accumulating. Level 5, Wakagashira. Rote, young deputy boss. You are in upper management now. Meeting rooms, figures, maps, and names at this layer of the operation. Hands rarely get dirty, but the mind never stops. You coordinate operations, rigged construction tenders, money laundering cycling through nightclubs along Dotonbori, the unmonitored portion of containers passing through the port. The most common and most secure method of laundering money is taught to you in detail at this level. Open cash-intensive businesses, add ghost customers to the records, report dirty money as clean revenue. A small ramen shop in Namba, a parking lot in Shinsaibashi, a massage parlor in Umeda. The books are tidy, taxes are paid, the accountant never asks anything. The system is this simple, and that simplicity unsettles you a little more each time, because the more ordinary it feels, the deeper you sink. You do these things without thinking now. While the numbers flow, some corner of your mind is calculating something else entirely: what you'll eat tomorrow, or whether you'll miss the last train. And that automatism, that numbing of feeling, is the thing that frightens you most. You can't quite remember when your conscience went quiet. Maybe it didn't go quiet. Maybe it just got tired. Level 6, Psycho Koman, Zogal Gumen, Supreme Advisor. Your hands no longer get dirty. Instructions are given. Results are reported. Names are noted. The first thing you notice when you reach this floor is the silence. Nobody talks to you unnecessarily anymore. Everyone weighs every word before speaking, because you do the same. Brought you to this position wasn't loyalty alone, it was your intelligence. It was knowing when to stay silent at the right moment in the right place. And the fact that you were never caught across all those years. The Japanese police Keisatsu Cho maintained an unusual balance with the Yakuza for decades. Certain organizations operated in a semi-legitimate status for years. Their offices were open with signage. Membership was practically common knowledge. It was a kind of silent agreement. The organization served as a buffer against uncontrolled crime, and the state looked the other way. The anti-Boryokuden laws enacted in 2012 shattered this balance fundamentally. You can't open a bank account. You can't sign a lease. Some hospitals won't admit you. The system pushes you to the margins of society, but you were already on the outside long ago. The difference now is that it's written on paper. Your high-level contacts no longer recognize you. Phone numbers change. Meetings get canceled without explanation. You feel the weight of the system slowly pulling you downward, not a dramatic collapse, a daily erosion. And that is perhaps the most insidious danger of all, being worn away without realizing it. Level 7. Oyabun, the father. The room at the very top is silent. It is not what you expected. No weapons, no ring of protection, no decor designed to intimidate. Only a dirty window where the morning sun enters at a low angle, a table, 2 cups of tea, and an old man sitting across from you. His hands rest on the table, motionless. His eyes scan you, but there is no threat in that gaze. It holds something far heavier: recognition. He sees you. The old man looks at you and asks, "How many people did you protect along this road?" You think. Names come, faces come. You count 17, maybe more. Some are outside the city now. Some are living entirely different lives. One of them has probably never thought of you again. "How many people were ruined because of you?" he asks next, in the same voice, with the same calm. You cannot answer. This time you cannot count, or you don't want to, and the difference between the two has grown very thin. The Oyabun leans back in his chair, takes a sip of his tea. "That is precisely why you can sit in this chair," he says, "because you are still counting." A long silence. From outside comes the sound of the city, distant and indifferent. The man at the very top is not the most powerful. He is the one who carries the most weight, and who has not been broken by carrying it. You are carrying that weight now. Your shoulders don't bend, but inside you bent long ago. You know this, not from your posture, but from what you see when you look in the mirror. Your father died 10 years ago, 2 years after the surgery, from complications, quietly. The last time you visited him in the hospital, you hadn't been able to stay long. There was work. There was always work. He looked at you. His eyes were tired, but something still flickered inside them. Maybe curiosity, maybe hope. "What kind of work are you doing, son?" he asked. "Work," you said. "Just work." He didn't ask again. You didn't look back as you walked out of the room. And now, this morning, sitting in the top chair for the very first time, you remember that question, and you think about how you knew the answer but couldn't say it, and how you will never be able to say it now. This is the heaviest thing you have ever carried. Heavier than rank, heavier than the years, heavier than all the names you lost along the way.